What advice would you give to catechumens or new converts to help them transition to Orthodoxy?
I this is more. I will let the priest handle this one.
Luther, you've been quiet for a little while. It's your turn to answer the question. Father
It
Jonathan put
was
you on the spot. You have to
it
answer.
was priest mode. I was on autopilot enjoying this. Advice for catechism. Um, I would say I would really say like to experience the liturgy, to try to go to all the services as much as you can. Um, don't just like read your way into orthodoxy, even though like reading is good, books are good. But it is very easy to like try to like make this a theological pursuit in your mind, and also not just like into like fight wars. Like, man, don't, if I could redo a lot of things, I wouldn't be arguing with family. I wouldn't be like trying to put the Orthodox flag posted down, like Orthodoxy has won the war. Don't do anything of that. Don't do any of that, because that can possibly rob you of the joy and appreciation of living the Orthodox life. I spent a lot of time doing some of that stuff, and so learn from my mistakes. I've argued with family, friends, like old pastors, like this, that, and it's like, and granted, like not all the time, but there's been my moments, and they weren't fulfilling. Um, and there's a joy of just living out the Orthodox life. Like, so I would say, go to church, go to as much of the divine liturgy as you can, practice it as much as you can. I think there's a saint, I can't remember the name of the saint, but basically it talks about like early on you should be, like very zealous, like live out the zeal. Whereas if you start off lax early on, then it's going to be really, really rough for you later. So he says it's very important to like you dive in. And when I say that, like obviously like talk to your priest when I mention this, but when I say dive in, I mean like be committed to the things that you said you were going to be committed to. So whether that's the liturgy, whether that's, going to confession, whether that's reading the scriptures, the things that if your priest gave you a prayer rule, if you've been inscribed certain things, do those things. Don't like try to wait till you're like, I don't know, chrismated, baptized to now take your faith seriously. Like take it seriously. So that's just my little advice, but I will hand it to my virtual priest here.
Well, Luther brings up a very good thing about attending the services. I tell the catechumens to attend Vespers and other services, not just liturgy. They've got to be steadfast in their Sunday attendance. That's true, but we're not a Sunday only phenomenon. We are a church that has a liturgical life outside of Sunday, so it's important to attend the other services. That's one. So I agree with Luther on that wholeheartedly. You can read your way into orthodoxy, but you will never become orthodox reading your way into orthodoxy, which leads to point number two, which is you will never argue anybody into the kingdom. So if that happens to a lot of converts. I've had some in my church where they're just so excited. They found this faith, and they take people by the shoulder and they say, I want to tell you why I'm going to become Orthodox. These people are like, okay, why you became it. I don't know if it's for me. I can see what it's doing to you. I don't want what it's doing to you to do to me. You're never going to argue someone into the kingdom. So don't even try. Right. Jesus said, I will draw all men to myself. So if and St. Innocent of Alaska, writing a letter to a young priest he was going to send out into the hinterlands of Alaska, he wrote him a letter, and one of the things he said in there was just remember that someone coming to the Lord is not by your work or effort, but is through the power of the Holy Spirit. Now, you still have to put out the work and effort, but don't think that when someone converts that they're doing it because of you. It's God that has drawn them to Himself. The third thing I would tell, related to that I would tell especially young men, don't worry about your girlfriend or spouse coming with you at the same time. Be an Orthodox man in all the fullness and glory of being an Orthodox man, Orthodox Christian man. Show your wife how much you love her more, respect her more, honor her more, love her more as an Orthodox Christian man. Show her how much this new life and this new faith means to you by learning how to serve her. And you'll see, if you can do all that, and pray over meals and pray at home, even if she doesn't pray with you at first. Just be steadfast in living an Orthodox Christian life without having to preach it. Live it. And if you do that, women notice. And their timing is not our timing, the timing of men. They notice these things, and they may come around if you don't badger and bother them to do so. They have to make it of their own accord. And be patient in that sense. You know, your kids, your spouse, your whoever, your parents, whoever, they're not going to see what you see right away. But if you start living that life, then that's what they're going to see. Oh, this faith, look, honey, look how much of a difference it makes to little Johnny here. You know, I mean, they'll start to notice. So live the faith, you know, be the faith, live it honestly and openly, and don't be hypocritical and double-minded about that being one thing in church and another thing at home, for example. You can't do that. That doesn't work. They'll see through that.
Yeah. Yeah, I would second definitely what both of you have said about you're not going to argue anyone into the faith. Now, I will say there are certain times when there are people who have questions and people who are
Okay.
open and want to have discussions, and at that point you can bring out, kind of the apologetic type stuff. Um but for someone who's not seeking it actively, that's not going to be useful for them. So you really have to know your audience and where people are. Um I think Father Michael from Living Orthodox did a video on this recently on this exact topic. Is like, when people convert to Orthodoxy and they're overzealous and they freak people out about it, that could be more detrimental because it could push them away from the faith because they're not ready for it. And you have to know your audience and know when people are ready for it. And what Father Jonathan's talking about is you can preach orthodoxy without using words. You can do that in a more subtle way by living it rather than, you know,
Arm wrestling
citing the
someone.
canons of the Seventh Ecumenical Council at your Presbyterian dad or something.
Yeah, and I think that's also maybe a fourth thing I would add to what I just said a moment ago. Not everybody, just because they've encountered the faith and are learning the faith and want to embrace the faith, are good at arguing the faith. You know, so just because you found orthodoxy doesn't mean you have to start your own YouTube channel next month. You may not be ready for that. You know, teaching is a spiritual gift, and not everybody necessarily has that. Not every priest necessarily has that, although it's one of our supposed to be one of our charisms. You just have to be very careful about understanding whether you're ready then to start engaging with anybody in any polemic or apologetic or anything like that, because you could do harm to yourself and you could do harm to the person you're talking to by not knowing what to say or how to say it or anything like that. And those are two different things. What to say and how to say it, you know, are definitely two different things. And you can master one and not the other. You've got to master both to get on with someone. I'm not talking about podcasting. I'm talking just one-on-one. You got to have both to know how to explain things. And a lot of times we try to repeat things we've read in books. Oh, yeah, I read this thing, and oh gosh, if only here, read this book, you know. And then that's not the way really we do apologetics. You know, we have to be able to defend the faith. St. Paul says that we have to be ready to give account for the hope that is within us. And that means, really, quite frankly, there's no other way to say this: shut up, learn from your priest, go to Bible study, go to the services, and just learn. And don't expect to be a YouTube podcasting apologist guy within the next month or two. It just doesn't work that way, and it shouldn't work that way.
Yeah. As far as any advice that I have for converts or new converts or catechumens, kind of in contrast to what Luther said earlier, obviously immerse yourself in the services, but also take your time and don't be overzealous. Don't give yourself an hour prayer rule. Like don't do things that you're going to not be able to sustain a week, a
Yeah.
month, a year. Again, remember this is something that you're going to be doing for the rest of your life, and you're going to be growing and doing more. And if you don't have room to do more,
Right.
like if you're lifting 500 pounds immediately, you're probably not. First of all, you're probably not going to lift it. Second of all, you're definitely not going to lift 600 pounds next week because you broke your back. So
Bailey,
just
I want to hop in. I do.
go ahead.
Yeah, I agree 1,000% what you're saying. So I wasn't saying that someone has to do 5,000 prostrations or anything like that. I meant like what you're doing in your faith, like as prescribed with your priest, like, don't forsake it is what I meant. Like, don't
Yeah,
just say, I'm not going to, yeah. But
I didn't think you meant like don't.
Yeah.
I know
I
what
don't
you
want
meant. I was just
I
trying
don't
to
want you,
nuance it in a different way. Yeah.
but yeah, you're completely right though. You don't want to like put too much weight on the bar because then you could go into, despair or something.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. You take too much on and you'll burn out sooner than later. And then once people burn out and they drop their prayer rule or whatever they do, then it's very hard to pick it back up.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And the saints.
Another thing is to not make an idol out of the church or your image or perception of the church, because as we kind of discussed, at least Luther and I, we had some expectations that were different from reality when we came in versus actually having lived it for a few years. So don't fall into that trap. That's not to say don't look up to the church. You should, but don't make it like Luther said, don't plant the flag.
Catholicism is destroyed. Protestantism. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last thing would be to just go to confession as often as you're able, because that's how you will actually grow.
Right.
Very true. There, because the act of confession requires us to acquire so many virtues, but most of all, it requires us to be humble. And like that old saying, being able to see yourself as you truly are is a greater feat than raising the dead. Is a verse that I remember quite often when it comes to things like that. And the orthodoxy helps us see ourselves as we truly are. It also helps us see ourselves as we can truly be, as the saint that God calls us to be. And having that vision of who we are and who we can be, that can be quite a dichotomy, but certainly having that ability to see who we are, what we should be, and what we can become, and having the tools given to us by God to be able to accomplish that, that's amazing. And that's such a comfort, such a challenge, and such a joy, and such a exciting a feat. I think that the excitement that gives a lot of people, especially men, is truly remarkable.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I think that's pretty much everything I've got for you guys. If anyone is interested in hearing more of what Luther and Father Jonathan have to say, I think you guys should do more stuff together where you're allowed to talk, because I know you guys do a lot of interviewing and this has been a really good conversations. I think
Yeah,
more
it's fun.
people need more of this kind of dynamic on the Transfigured Life.
You heard that, Father? He said we got to do more 2-on-2s like we used to.
Luther,
We're working on that. Yeah.
When we started the channel, it was just you and me, and we thought, hey, let's invite this guy on and talk to him, and then it steamrolled from there, and
it did.
Here we're known as the interviewing guys or whatever. But yeah, Luther and I have talked about doing more talking of just ourselves, and we look forward to kind of doing that more in the future. It's coming up.
Yeah.
Great. Awesome. Well, people should go subscribe to the Transfigured Life if they're not already. And if you guys have anything else you want to add or plug as we're wrapping up, you can go ahead and do that.
Thank you again, Bailey, and everybody should subscribe to Unto Ages, and we're going to be putting those links on our site too.
Thank you,
I
brother.
appreciate you, Bailey. Yeah, if I could just brag on Bailey real quick, Father, this dude he's awesome. I would say out of all the content creators, I probably talk to Bailey like the most, like every other day. It feels like. So he's really become like a true friend. He's a great guy. So I appreciate him.
Amen. And thank you, Bailey, for the invitation for Luther and I to be on your show.
Yeah, thank you guys both for coming on, and it's been a great talk.